be available through the email campaign that you received. We will have some questions and answers at the end of this session. If you're not aware of Google, at the bottom right hand corner there's like a little chat box where you can say chat with everyone. If you do have any questions, please type them in there and we will see to all the questions at the end of this session. Without further ado, I'd like to just introduce our speakers. So Bill will be our main speaker today. Bill is our experienced assessor. He's been with A2B Assessments for about 3 years. He's also an assistive technology trainer. So he will be going over and talking about the support that is available through the DSA. We'll also hear from one of our students who came through A2B Assessments to have his DSA, Hendrix, who will talk a little bit about his experience. And then our customer experience manager, Isaac Ampofo, will be available at the end for any questions and answers. So I'd like to now introduce you to Bill. Thank you, Bill.
Thank you, Madeline. Thank you. Hello, everybody. Yes, it's lovely to see so many people here who kind of want to Oh, sorry,
Bill, we can't seem to hear you.
Oh, can you not? Hang on, what's going on there? How about now? Is that better? Any luck? Oh, some people can hear me. Yeah? All right. Okay, fantastic. False alarm. So yeah, so as Madeline said, I'm one of the assessors here at A2B Assessments. So looking at what I want to do today basically is look at the DSA process, talk about the kind of support which is available through DSA, and also look at how someone who might perceive further education and higher education as being something that is is unreachable for them, how we might be able to support them and how we might be able to remove some of those barriers for them. So I'm just going to have a quick check of the time just to make sure I don't go over the limit. So the first thing I want to talk about is the kind of the DSA process and applying for DSA. So at A2B we've developed a infographic to help demonstrate this, which I'll briefly show you. I'm just about to share my screen, so hopefully everybody will be able to see this. Should make itself clear shortly. There we go. Yeah, I can see that shared. So this is an infographic that we at A2B put together about the DSA application process. I'm not going to go into this in too much detail because I believe there is a whole other webinar that we've done which talks about this process in more detail. But first things, obviously start where we're starting now, basically today, with professionals like yourselves or maybe people who work with the university, informing the student about DSA. It's not always that well signposted, but the earlier that we can get them kind of engaged and knowing that it's there for them, the better. So DSA, who's eligible for it. So we're looking at any kind of specific learning differences such as dyslexia, ADHD, but also kind of long-term mental health conditions, long-term health conditions, mobility difficulties. So it's a really broad range of things that people can apply for. Once they apply, they'll send through some medical evidence. That might be a sort of doctor's note, or it might be a sort of diagnostic report, or an education, health and care plan, through to their funding body, which most of the time in this country, as in England, will be Student Finance England. And then book an assessment. At the assessment, the plan is basically just to talk about what barriers that student is experiencing. What we're doing, what I'm doing sort of day to day is talking to students about what is making study difficult for them, whether they are kind of 2 years into their degree, whether they haven't started, whether they're somewhere in between. and just sort of digging down into the barriers that they're facing, so the things that are making things difficult for them, and looking at as well, like, any strategies that they are currently using, anything that they're currently finding helpful, with uh, you know, accessing sort of reading materials or accessing study materials, and again kind of building on that. So it's all about kind of helping give that student some independence. We'll then write a report, which we'll send off to the funding body, summarising what we've discussed and the recommendations that we've made. During the assessments, we'll usually demonstrate some software. There's also kind of equipment allowance, there's software, there's sort of what we call non-medical help support, which is kind of one-to-one assistance. And then that's sent off to the students' funding body, who review it and hopefully approve the support that we've recommended. So that's a kind of brief overview of the DSA process. As I said, there is a kind of a longer webinar that we've done, and I believe you can get online. So what I want to talk about now is the sort of students that we're meeting with, and what people are perceiving as potential barriers that would make it difficult for them to access higher education. So, you know, one of the things when somebody is thinking about going to onto a degree, they might think, you know, that say if they, you know, experience a specific learning difference such as dyslexia, they might think that, you know, the amount of reading that you have to do and the amount of independent research that you have to carry out on your own without necessarily being guided around that would be kind of intimidating, that it would be difficult for them to keep up, that they would be kind of constantly falling behind or something like that. Similarly, someone might have that same kind of reaction to the knowledge that there's going to be a lot of written work. Maybe somebody who, you know, has difficulties with spelling, difficulties with, you know, expressing their thoughts in writing. Even though they may have a good understanding of the subject matter, they might find it difficult to put that into words. So long essays and dissertations, and you'll often find actually that, you know, higher education applications tend to sort of self-select. You know, just sort of thinking from experience, you know, my own brother is dyslexic, and, you know, chose to study physics, not necessarily because he enjoyed physics that much, just because he knew there were no essays, you know. So those kind of things can be a barrier for a lot of people. Another thing that somebody might find intimidating about, you know, higher education is the amount of independent study that they have to do. So you know, when you come from college or school environment, you're kind of guided pretty much every step along the way, and then to be suddenly thrown into an environment where, you know, you get maybe 6 or 7 hours worth of contact time per week, and the rest of the time it's up to you. That kind of, without that guidance, without that help, people might find that quite intimidating, especially if they have difficulty kind of with organization, with time management, with motivation and things like that. The other important difference between, you know, school education and university education is that, you know, you're often going to be living independently, and that comes with its own set of challenges. So kind of new sets of people, you know, anxiety around those sort of social issues, again, difficulty with organization, and kind of that kind of independent living. And there are strategies that will help with that. And finally, you know, a big thing that people might experience is difficulty with exams. So nerves around kind of exam times, and you know, worrying, especially like a lot of the time if they have had extra time during school, like making sure that they have access to that at university. And applying for DSA can be a big part of that. You know, needing that support can be a big part of why people want to apply for DSA. So I'm going to kind of go on to talk a little bit about the sort of support. So if we're taking all of those into account, the sort of support that is available through the DSA. Now, it really varies from, person to person. So, I always say to my students that something that works well for you isn't necessarily going to work for the next person I meet, and vice versa. So we try and be as kind of individual about it as possible. But broadly, the way that it shakes down at the end of the day is there's an equipment allowance that you can apply for through DSA. There's a non-medical help allowance, which is kind of one-to-one support and assistance. There's a general allowance, which can help with things such as kind of extra printing costs, those kind of peripheral costs. And there's a travel allowance as well. If somebody needs difficulty actually getting in and out every day, they can apply for support through that as well. So in terms of the one-to-one support that's most frequently recommended, there's usually kind of 2 or 3 different types. So for students with sort of specific learning differences such as dyslexia, dyspraxia, ADHD, one of the most commonly recommended ones is study skills and strategy support, right? Now that is kind of targeted around building up the students' kind of academic skills, right? So again, the aim with almost all of the support that we do recommend is in kind of like building up the students' kind of independence and giving them strategies that they can then take away and use on their own, right? So a study skills support, might be really helpful in terms of helping somebody to unpick an assignment brief, write an essay, help with kind of proofreading their work if they find it difficult to spot mistakes and things like that. And the other most frequently recommended one-to-one support is specialist mentoring, which is most commonly recommended for students with a mental health condition, or alternatively with autism or autistic spectrum students, to help with their kind of well-being, make sure they're not kind of getting overwhelmed, that kind of thing. Moving on to kind of the assistive technology software, which is a big part of kind of, it's a big factor of what I do, because as Madeline said, apart from being a DSA needs assessor, I also work as an assistive technology trainer. So I'm kind of out there in the wild, actually kind of training students on this stuff. If we've got a moment at the end, I'll try and do a little demonstration for you. But there's other places that you can go to for that. The most frequent, or one of the most frequent tools that is recommended is a text-to-speech tool, right? So we might be looking at two primary programs. So one is called Read and Write, or Text Help Read and Write, and the other is called Clara Read. And what that does basically is it reads aloud to the student from the document that's in front of them, and it allows them to help with processing, with kind of understanding, what's going on in that text. So what they'll often say to me is things like, oh, when I'm reading, I find that I'm having to go through things a number of times, and it's hard to get it to stay in my head. And that's particularly true when you make that jump to kind of academic reading, where there's huge long journal articles and things like that you have to make your way through, and you can get a bit lost in the weeds. I think something like text to speech, where they can hear it and they can read it at the same time, allows them to kind of process that information using 2 senses. And when they've done studies and things like that, they've found that helps to improve that processing skill. Another key strategy that I think works really well for a variety of different things is mind mapping. So you're probably familiar with mind mapping as a strategy on paper. I always used to get encouraged to do mind mapping myself when I was at school, and to be honest with you, I hated it, because I can't draw for a start. And secondly, as soon as you make a mistake on your piece of paper mind map, you've either got to cross it out, in which case it looks ugly, or you've got to sort of rip it all up and start again. When you're sort of mind mapping on a piece of software, you've got the option to if you make a mistake, you can Control Z like you would with, like a Word document, or you can just drag and drop things into their correct place. So if you decide actually these 2 or 3 branches, they should all be in the same category, you can just drag them over. So in terms of helping students with kind of planning out written work, or kind of like expanding their thoughts, or just kind of making notes, maybe it can be a really useful tool. And it's great for organization as well, and a lot of students, especially if they're just coming from school, then they like I said earlier, they're having to adjust to that sort of lifestyle where they're in control of their own time, and that can be really kind of overwhelming. I remember myself, when I started at university, I found myself just kind of not really knowing what I was supposed to be doing each day, because there isn't a plan. So there are tools that we can recommend that will help with that. So for instance, there's a tool that's been quite popular very recently, which is called Boost, Boost with 3 O's, which allows students to link with a calendar, so like a Google Calendar or an Outlook calendar, and view their timetable. Into that, they can also add their kind of to-do list as well. So if you've got a couple of hours free during the middle of the day, which will often be the case if you only have kind of 10 or 11 hours worth of contact time, you can kind of say, okay, well, what tasks do I need to look at during that time? And you can select from your kind of task list, which the app also allows you to do, and kind of work on those tasks. Or you can choose alternatively to work on kind of like self-care routines and things like that that are more valuable. And another thing that most commonly is kind of recommended, when students have real difficulty with what's called executive function, so decision making. So often students on the autistic spectrum, or sort of students who maybe have kind of cognitive difficulties due to brain injury, or the variety of different things, and that's called Brain in Hand. Brain in Hand is a really useful tool, because it allows you to keep decision-making skills in an app on your phone, right? So if you can schedule unplanned events and look for potential solutions to problems that might arise. It's a complicated one, but it's hard to describe. But if you go and look it up, you'll find that. And that's so the next thing that I wanted to talk about actually is a very common recommendation, which is for speech to text. So this is dictation software, right? And I'm actually gonna, because we've got a little bit of time, I'm gonna try and do a brief demonstration of this, just so you can get an idea of what I'm talking about. But essentially, dictation allows you to 2 things. So firstly, if you find spelling a challenge, right, it's often much easier to say it than to spell it. For instance, I actually ironically, I find it quite difficult to spell the word assessment. I can never remember how many S's are in it. So using Dragon is really useful, because I can just say the word straight into a headset such as this, and it will type it out for me. Also, if students, if they have difficulty with concentration, they find that they're like losing track of the thought before they can get the sentence down when they're writing. Again, being able to just say it out loud gives you a really it's a really powerful tool. So I'm going to share my screen, and hopefully I'll be able to do a quick demonstration of this software for you. So bear with me. So you should be able to see my screen. I've got a word processor open. And I've got Dragon open up here. So Dragon is this toolbar up at the top. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch it on by pressing on this red button here. And from that point onwards, it will be trying to listen to what I say and try and type it out for me. So, good afternoon, everyone. Comma. New paragraph. This is a quick example of how I can use Dragon to type using my voice, full stop. This allows me to spell tricky words and focus on what I want to say, full stop. So, comma, for instance, comma, I can use the word, open quotes, assessment, close quotes, whenever I like, without having to worry about the spelling of it, full stop. New paragraph. As you can tell, comma, when you use Dragon, you have to get used to saying your punctuation out loud, full stop, which can be difficult for some people at first, comma. However, comma, you find that you get quite used to it eventually, full stop. New paragraph. What I really like Dragon for is that it massively increases the speed at which I can work, full stop. This means that I don't get distracted before I can capture my thoughts in writing, full stop. And I can get my work done more efficiently, full stop. New paragraph. Most people, when they are typing, can achieve speeds of between 60 and 70 words per minute, full stop. However, comma, with dictation, comma, it's quite natural to achieve speeds of 100 words per minute or more, full stop. Go to sleep. So I've just switched Dragon to sort of sleep mode here, and you can see it's still listening to me, but it's not going to type anything because I haven't given it its wake command. But yes, that's just a very brief introduction to the sort of support that's on offer through DSA, and a quick demonstration of one of the most commonly recommended tools, which is Dragon Dictation. So yeah, I think that's pretty much everything that I wanted to say. I mean, it's worth saying that there are other tools available that you can get access to right now, and you can find more information about those on the A2B website. But yeah, so notable to help students kind of get used to using some of these tools. Tools like Xmind for helping students learn a mind mapping strategy. Quizlet is a great one for kind of revision and things like that. But I think that's bang on 25 minutes. So I'm gonna hang up my my speaking for a bit.
That's great, Bill. Thank you so much for presenting that for us and showing us a demonstration, which was very useful, and I hope that's been helpful for those of you who've been watching this. I'm going to pass on to Hendrix. Hendrix had an assessment with A2B about 4 years ago, so he's going to just tell you a little bit about where his difficulties were and where he is now. Over to you, Hendrix.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. So I was diagnosed with dyslexia and dyspraxia in primary school. It was a difficult time in terms of accessing formal education. Not being able to process information or communicate was discouraging. However, the diagnosis at the time was supportive in terms of accessing intensive speech and language therapy, one-to-one support in the classroom, and software. Around the time I was transitioning into college, Ehcp plans were introduced. I believe due to the high level of need at the school and the lack of funding, I did not receive the support I needed. Subsequently, I performed really poorly at my GCSEs and failed my A-levels. About a year after, I was able to enroll on a BTEC Health and Social Care program. Again, it was difficult being 2.5 years older than other students, but my ambition was to become a social worker. I struggled with all the written demands, everything, but, I was encouraged by teachers to apply to university, that kind of on the proviso that support would be available. I applied to a series of universities. Again, I was declined several offers because I failed a written task. I wasn't writing, in enough depth. I wasn't, meeting the target. But, fortunately, I was accepted at Goldsmiths University. Now in 2018, I met Mr. Isaac, who was my brilliant assessor at the time, very supportive. Collaboratively, we created a plan of support, which entailed meeting with a study skills tutor weekly, who assisted me to proofread assignments and to meet deadlines. I was also offered software, dictation software that I could use to complete assignments, which was more helpful for me. In 2019, whilst on my final placement in the community mental health team, I contacted Isaac again, as I was struggling with the demands of academic work, as well as, writing reports for tribunals, kind of making recommendations on clients on section under the Mental Health Act. Isaac helpfully allowed me to adjust the program, so the study skills worker was able to meet with me weekly at my placement setting and help me to develop in that role. I am now qualified as a social worker, fortunately, and I do have the courage to continue my studies. I will be completing a solicitor conversion course in January, and I will be applying to DSA. So, I can only thank Mr. Isaac and everyone for the support. And if you could just all encourage, your students to apply so that they can fulfill their potential.
That's great, Hendrix. It's lovely to hear your story and how well you're succeeding in your further studies and hopefully your career. Denise Clark saying, congratulations, Hendrix, well done in your achievements. We can all agree with that. As I said, we would love to hear from you. If you have got any questions, I've seen a couple that have come through. I'm going to pass it over to Isaac. If you use the chat function to type in your questions, we will happily answer them as well as we can. If anyone does have any questions after this webinar, of course, you're more than welcome to contact us and we'll be more than happy to answer those questions. And we can send you some further information in a follow-up email. We can send you some links for some of the software that Bill spoke about. And we can also send you a link to a webinar that we had before where we went through the DSA process in a bit more detail. So as I said, there have been a couple of questions popping in. So I'm going to pass you over to Isaac, who should be able to help you out the best he can.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for that, Madeline, Hendrix and Bill. Just picking up on some of the questions that's come through. So first one from Chris, what percentage of DSA applicants are successful? I wouldn't be able to put a specific number on it. However, there's guidance if a student does get initially rejected for DSA support. And what will happen is their funding body will go back to that student and ask them probably for additional information regarding medical evidence surrounding the disability or condition that they're seeking support with. So it's generally quite a high rate of success though. If a student is fulfilling the application successfully, which they can do with either their disability team at school, if they're still studying, or going into university, or the assessment centre that they're looking to work with for the duration of their studies, they can work with that team to help successfully complete the application process, because it can be a bit lengthy. And if you're someone who struggles with written communication, it's good to kind of get some support on that as well. But generally, the success rate for applications is quite high for that one, Chris. So hopefully that answers your questions. Samantha here for dragging in a busy environment. Yeah, that can be the case. So that's why Bill Bruce today is wearing his headset, as it helps kind of alleviate sort of that background noise to give more a clearer dictation service as you're going forward. But I appreciate that if you're in a busy working environment or study environment, that it can interrupt with that. But Bill, I don't know what your experience is like when you are working in a busy environment, or where students do come back to you when they're working in that sort of environment, if it does disrupt the clarity of those communications.
Yeah, it would obviously.
Oh, I think you're on mute, bud.
Oh, sorry. No. Oh, Am I?
No, gotcha.
Okay, never mind. Yeah, it ordinarily working in a noisy background environment such as a school, or something like that would be tricky. The thing is, most of the time when a student's going to be using this, they're going to be using this at home. So they have slightly more control over the sound input. Which I hope answers your question. But yeah, because the microphone has difficulty kind of picking out, what is speech, background sound can upset it a little bit.
Cool. Okay, thanks for that, Bill. Just moving on to Johnny here. Do you have to have an Ehcp plan to apply for DSA? No, you don't. Essentially, it can be, depending on the condition, all it is a GP's letter or a clear diagnosis of that condition. So you don't have to have an Ehcp plan. That can be helpful, yes, because then we can look at previous strategies that have been introduced and difficulties that a student has had beforehand. However, it's not necessary. So the medical evidence can really range depending on the condition. As long as it clearly details the diagnosis, that should be fine. And it's sort of signed by the medical professional, be it a GP or a mental health practitioner, or an educational psychologist if the condition falls under the specific no difficulty category. So it doesn't have to be a specific plan, as you said there on that one. Denise, can you apply for DSA if transitioning from sixth form to college? So the Disabled Students Allowance is only for level 4 students and above. So that's a foundation course and above. So if you're at college, you won't be eligible for this particular fund. So if that's the case, if you're still studying at college, it's normally signposting back to the SEN team on hand for that support. Or if there's an apprenticeship, students looking to do an apprenticeship, there's also apprenticeship funding available, but that's a different funding body. So again, this is for level 4 courses and above for the DSA. So hopefully that answers that question, but you can apply for DSA whilst you are in college. So the moment you're looking to go to university on your final year of studies whilst you're at college or secondary school, you can actually apply for DSA, because the whole process from the application stage to actually receiving your support can take up to 3 months. So we always encourage students who are kind of come off the end of their secondary school education to actually apply early when they're going for the UPS process, when they're applying for student finance if they're going that route as well. So apply as early as possible on that one. We'll just raise the awareness just to see what support's out there. And again, we always advise students to try and contact their prospective universities as well ahead of starting their course, just to get the ball rolling to see what support or interim support is available for that student prior to them coming on board. And so hopefully that answers that question for you, Denise. Liz, when is the best time to get students thinking about this application? As soon as, essentially. So, like I said, if you're in secondary education, or to be honest, even sooner than that, because I guess from speaking with Henry's experience today, if you feel as a student that you have potential barriers that may isolate you or limit you progressing through to what you want to do, your dreams of either being a social worker or studying more, then that's already kind of putting you off of studying. So I think the sooner we can discuss this with students to say, actually, well, there is support higher education if you need it to help empower you, to help get over those hurdles, those potential barriers you may come upon while studying, because the earlier the better, because then straight away that student's mindset has changed from a negative where there's support available. And that's what we're trying to do, is essentially push that empowerment of the student and boost the awareness to make that person feel more comfortable, more confident, and overall achieve what they want to achieve when they go into higher education. So the sooner the better, but in terms of actually application side of things, if you're in your last year of study, that's when you're probably going to be studying, applying for the DSA going forward. So hopefully that answers that question there, Liz, and I'm more than happy to talk more about the DSA process if in more detail, should you need more detail. Hannah, if a student has a diagnosis of dyslexia from primary school, will this still be accepted? No, that's absolutely fine. So a few years ago, the rules changed. It used to be a post-16 diagnostic report, but now a primary school diagnosis is absolutely fine. So a student won't be required to get another one done prior to going to university. So yeah, pre-16 and after 16 diagnosis is absolutely fine. So hopefully that student won't have to cough up more money to get that diagnosis clear, because I appreciate they can be quite expensive to get done. Amanda, are you the only company providing DSA assessments? Nope, we're not. Essentially, there's quite a few assessment centres out there. So how the application process works is once a student has become made eligible for DSA support, they essentially get signposted to a government website to look up either their nearest assessment centre, or they can just sort of Google DSA assessment centres in their area and see who comes up. We're on Google, so you'll feel free to check us out and see what our students say about us to get a bit more feedback on that one. But a student has free choice about where they go and take that assessment. And the second part of your question here, also, how do you support students to attend assessment centres that are not close to where they live? Sure, great question. So once you've reconfirmed them eligible for a studies assessment, like I said, the student will be signposted assessment centre after they put in their postcode. So at present, we are offering 3 different forms of assessment. So it can be a remote assessment, either a phone call or a video assessment, to hopefully alleviate that potential barrier of actually physically attending one. Or we can have a physical face-to-face assessment and the student come into the assessment centre to have that discussion. If a student is having difficulty getting to the centre and they don't want a remote assessment, then they can actually get travel funding to their assessment centre, and that will be reimbursed by their funding body. And this information is detailed in what's called their eligibility letter, which is the letter that gets sent out to the students on successful application of DSA. So hopefully that removes the barriers there. So remote assessments, but also face-to-face assessments, but also transport to that assessment centre if need be, and that'll be reimbursed by the funding body. So hopefully that answers your question there, Amanda. No worries, Samantha, you're welcome, thank you. Is a formal diagnosis of dyslexia needed, or would evidence from a school dyslexic tendencies suffice? So good question, Z. So essentially, if it's a clear diagnosis by either a specialist educational psychologist or a specialist educational teacher who specialises in specific learning difficulties, that will be fine. Because I appreciate there's two forms of diagnosis that generally come forward, so that should be absolutely fine. And when you say dyslexic tendencies, yeah, so that's something that Student Finance England do confirm eligibility for DSA. So a student will be able to send that information in to Student Finance for approval on that one. Johnny, no worries. Melanie, no worries. Oh, more love for you, Hendrix, there coming through. Who funds the DSA? So Disabled Students Allowance is under the umbrella of the Department of Education, and therefore the funding it's a government fund. So with regards to the government fund, it's not means tested, so it's not based on the student's family income, and nor is it a loan. So the student does not have to pay this back at the completion of their studies. It's a grant, and essentially it is paid for by the government. That's who funds the DSA. So it's under the umbrella of the Department of Education, and then Student Loans Company essentially will fund it. But like I said, it's not means tested and it's not a loan. So therefore the student does not need to require to pay it back at the end of their studies. So hopefully that answers that one, Lewis. Is the application process free of charge? Yes, absolutely. I feel like there'll be quite a lot of uproar if there was a charge for it. But as of today, the 25th of May 2022, it is free of charge. So again, more encouragement for students to actually get on board with that and apply for DSA. Denise, you're welcome, no worries. Okay, Reed's got to go. So college can be level 4 and above. Students can be eligible for full-time student loan. This can be after 6th form, so DSA. Yeah, absolutely. So level 4 and above, like I said, that should be absolutely fine to apply for DSA. So if a student's still at one of those colleges that offers a level 4 course, then that's absolutely fine to apply for DSA. For you, Chris, there. Hugh, psychologist or specialist teacher's diagnostic report for dyslexia can be costly and may not be available to someone in school. How the students with clear difficulties but no diagnostic report apply? Great question, and I 100% appreciate that the assessment itself for a specific learning difficulty can be really, really pricey. So what I would for that one, if a student is looking to go to a prospective university, certainly contact the university, because some universities do have an in-house screening process for that, which is generally either free of charge or a significantly reduced rate for the assessment itself. So that's one point of contact Local council is another point of contact to get that diagnostic screening. And there's also, I believe, more companies popping up that are offering a far reduced rate for the initial assessment. But I would certainly signpost a student to their HEI disability team to see if they had that interim support or assessment or screening process to help manage the costs of that. There's also various charities available for such additional costs that screening incurs. It's definitely something that we have spoken to DFE about in terms of, well, actually that's in itself a barrier to get that support. But generally, guys do have screening processes in place for students with specific learning difficulties going forward. Does DSA apply to apprenticeships too? No, it doesn't. So there is an apprenticeship scheme available to cover funding for students going for apprenticeships, but it's not something I'm super familiar with. So I think it's best bet is to kind of try and find out a bit more information on that one, as I wouldn't want to give you the wrong information. Hannah, RHE College offer financial support for diagnostic screening if students try to afford it, so it might be worth students. Yeah, cool. Also, that's very similar to what I just said, echoing my point. So thanks for backing up there, Hannah. That's looks like all the questions I've got on there so far. But if anyone's got anything else that they want to sort of discuss in more detail, feel free to. Put me off fine there, Melanie. Waiting lists for autism assessments are quite lengthy. Yep. If a student feels they're autistic, is receiving support at college, but hasn't been assessed yet, can they still apply for DSA? Really good question. I think from a funding body's perspective, if there isn't a clear diagnosis for autism or being on the ASD spectrum, it may be difficult. However, if there's evidence based in school, it's certainly worth. All they can do is say no or ask for further information. And like I said, it doesn't cost that person anything to do it other than time. And it also means that they're in the DSA system anyway, as in their kind of their book, so to speak. So at least the ball is rolling there, and the student can get feedback in terms of what steps they can take next to get that. But I appreciate the list is it can be a couple of years for that sort of diagnosis, which is obviously very frustrating straight away. I would certainly emphasise that students speaking with their university team to explain the situation, that there's essentially ASD tendencies that have been recognised early by the SEN department or the previous educator, and to pass that information on to the HEI's disability team to see what interim support is available for that, because generally universities do have some support at their disposal to help with students in that one. But I'd certainly still encourage that student to apply for DSA. So hopefully that answers your question there, Melanie. Amazing. I think that is everyone, unless anyone wants to put anything else in there. Johnny, Echo, you said, yep, don't have a diagnosis. Yeah, exactly that. Really can't emphasize enough that it's really important that students contact their university, even if they haven't got a confirmed place there, just to inquire what support they have in place for students with disabilities going forward, just so they're in the system. It makes the process a lot easier, and it also encourages that university to actually discuss with them reasonable adjustments that may be able to put in place prior to actually coming into university. In particular, Bill mentioned the kind of social side of interaction, new environment, independent learning, independent thought. Those are all really, really important, and they're not necessarily directly linked to academics. However, they're still part of the student experience, and it's something that we do try and encourage and empower students to give them that confidence to achieve, not just at university, but also beyond. And I guess Hendrix is a perfect example of that today. So yeah, I think that's everything for the question, guys. But like I said, Madeline will ping over my email after this as well. So if you've got any further questions or queries, please feel free to contact me on that, and I'll do my best to answer those questions. Absolutely, yeah, you can pop it. What is this, Johnny? And pop it on our website. Yeah, totally do that. I'm sure, Madeline, you can take care of that. And guys, feel free to check out our website as well if there's any more information you guys need on sort of the Dsa Process or our assessments or our assessment company, and go from there. Other than that, I'll hand over to you, Madeline.
Thank you. Very much, Isaac. Just a big thank you for everyone who attended this webinar. Just to reiterate, we will be sending out a link of this recorded version and some of the resources that we talked about in this webinar. We can also send the link. If anyone does have any questions, yes, we are, obviously more than welcome for you to just ping any emails over to us. You can also contact our admin team. If you go onto our A2B Assessments website, you can contact our admin team. They are more than happy and very experienced and very friendly, and they will answer any questions. Another big thank you to Bill and to Hendrix and to Isaac for answering all those questions, and another thank you for everyone who attended. We hope you found it useful. Thank you.
Bye.